just to simplify, periodization can be a bit of a fancy buzzword, but essentially it's just what are we prioritizing in our program in this current phase? And you can look at that from a daily to a weekly, monthly, and a little bit longer over, obviously more of a macro yearly point of view. So probably if we start big picture, how do we want to play? What's the game model? Are we going to be playing fast, attacking brand of footy? Are we going to be more contest-based, defensive style play? Are we going to be more skill acquisition, maintaining possession? So understanding really clearly on how the team's going to play. Then within that, what's our profile of our training squad? Where do our athletes sort of sit from a profile point of view, from conditioning, aerobic capacity, to speed, to our strength, to our power qualities? And then ultimately, what's in front of us? Where are we at? Are we coming off a Christmas break where the players have had 3 weeks off and you really don't know what they've done? Some have followed the program, some have done their own program, some have done not much at all. And they've been perhaps overseas or in an area that they have no access to any equipment. So there's lots of factors that can go into it, lots of constraints, a lot of things out of our control. But ultimately, if we're just keeping it a simple focus on it, periodization is what's important right now. Why does it matter in AFL? It's one of the more complex and chaotic games. It's the longest duration game. So obviously from an endurance perspective, it's highly demanding, highly stressful, but it's also 360 degrees. So the nature of the agility and the contact aspect just means that there's a lot of strain and stress and a lot of awkward positions that the body's put under. Therefore, we want to make sure that we're understanding on what's required for that week to be able to allow the athletes to be robust and continue that robustness development, but also not go into the game fatigued. And there's a real sweet spot with that. You can definitely undershoot and be conservative, whether you call that a medical model or not. Essentially, it's just undershooting and focusing on allowing players to be available, but are they really at their peak for performance? And then you've got the performance model, and the extreme of that is you might be on a bit more of on the risk side of things. Perhaps you're exposing yourself to more load-related injuries naturally, especially with a squad of 45. Not everyone's going to be able to handle a demanding program with that trade-first mentality. So you can have different approaches, but we want to be thinking yearly. We want to be thinking more, and then in terms of monthly training blocks and what's our big focus from a physical point of view. So it's really important the whole club's on board on each training session so we know where we're working. If we break it down into, from an AFL perspective, pre-season, we've got our foundation period, which is pre-Christmas. Then we've got our transition period, which is the new year. And then the phase that we're in currently when we're working towards game fitness and looking at our training squad for round one. And then you've got obviously the home and away season, which is long. And then you've got your finals, which clearly we want to be in the best shape that we could possibly can be and most available come finals. Then you've got your final block, which is the off season, which is all about rejuvenation and mental and physical recovery. Moving into our in-season mode, it's really important that we're not going into that recovery cycle where with the mindset is that pre-season is where you do your work, in-season is where you work hard on game day, and the rest is recovery. It's really important that we're putting in the work in the gym early in the week. So high intensity in the gym early in the week while we're still recovering, and then high intensity on the field later on the week as we're preparing for the game. So we want high max force, high power work early in the week. That's going to help with the recovery process, but it's also going to help with stimulating the body and making sure they're still moving the needle with their strength and power because the volumes are down. So if you're covering 25K a week, you in preseason at times you're covering 40K a week. So they're significantly down in season. It's a great opportunity to make some strength and power progress for those athletes that need it. Common pre and in-season mistakes. The program is too rigid, both in the gym and with the conditioning. And strength and conditioning coaches are more prioritizing your 2K time trial and fitness tests or your max 1RM. And you're not thinking about what's most important, which is their football and their availability. So we want to push that. Those things are important, but we don't want to sacrifice peak performance on those tests for the detriment to the player. So making sure an individualized approach is always at our forefront. In season, like I mentioned before, too heavily focused on the recovery program. Recovery should be up until the 3 days post game day, and then the athletes should be recovered. Now we're focusing on performance. So if you got a 7-day break, the first half of it, 3 days, is heavily recovery focused. The next 4 days leading up to game day or 3 days leading up to game day should be heavily performance focused. And that's going to be different for each individual.